This is weed of the day. Quite a few samples. It's a pretty famous weed, so we just pass it around. So there's a lot of individuals there, so that okay, my name is Bill Hammond. A lot of folks just call me Dr. Bill, out of respect for my my old age, I guess. I've been in the industry for the weed control industry for many years. I started with Monsanto way back in 1969. Sorry, it was 73, I guess, and worked at the research station over here for 3.5 years. Then went back and worked for Monsanto in research and development here in Lethbridge for another 20 some odd years. I retired or took a retirement package in 2003 and started my own research business, which we call Hamman Ag Research. We have a research farm just to the west of Lethbridge. We do contract research for a lot of the major chemical companies working with insecticides, fungicides, as well as herbicides. And we also do some hybrid development with canola with a couple of different companies, as well as wheat variety development and malt barley development is what we're doing right now with a company called Malt Europe. So we have a pretty wide range of projects that we conduct out there just west of Lethbridge. And I have 12 people that work for me during the summer, part-time. And one of the things I do in winter is I do the pesticide applicator course for the Lethbridge College, and we also do it up at Camrose. So the pest applicator course is for custom applicators, farmers that want to be able to be certified applicators and do custom application for other farmers. Or we also get industrial folks that come in, as well as landscape folks to get their certification so they can go out and do custom application or even applying on public land. So I've been doing that since 1992, and so that's quite a few years experience there. One of the things that we do is we talk about some of the prohibited weed species, prohibited noxious weeds. And that weed that I passed around, how many know what it is?
I can't tell you. I've tried absinthe once, but I didn't feel anything. That's my hint.
That is diffuse knapweed or spotted knapweed.
Oh.
And I don't...
And then I was wrong then.
Erin McElroy, who works for the city of Lethbridge here, she knows them intimately because she's been involved in an eradication management program along the river valley, and I think down at the Helen Schuler Coulee Center there, Helen Schuler Center in the Coulee there, whatever that's called. Anyway, she's had a couple of these knapweed roundups. This is a nasty one that Waterton Park has been after for many years, and they have their knapweed roundup once a year, sometime in June, where volunteers come in and help pull that weed, especially down in that lower level close to the lake. It's a weed, of course, that we got from BC. Blame it on British Columbia, but it's been a nasty range weed out there for many years. There's been some pretty good biological control agents with it, and in fact the Kamloops Research Station used to be Agriculture Canada Research Station. When they closed that Kamloops station down, they converted it over to produce these biocontrol agents for knapweed. And over many years, farmers, ranchers would come in and get their supply of these little bugs and take out and release on the range. And I always thought that was kind of not really a rancher thing to do, is to go in and get some bugs and go out and spread them around. But it's been a fairly effective program for control of that knapweed. There's a couple of great industrial products that the Bayer has, Dow Agro have for control of that knapweed. And I see just this year, both Navius, I think it was just this year, Navius and TruVist are listed in our crop protection manual. So they are a couple of industrial products that do a good job with a new product, aminocyclopyrachlor, that is the active ingredient in both those products, or one of the actives. And just a nice opportunity if you have some nasty weed problems in a waste area to be able to look a little bit at a couple or either one of those industrial products. So that's TruVist and Navius. And I know the city of Lethbridge likes that Navius product as something to help them with control, I think, not only of the knapweed, but also with leafy spurts. So anyway, that's just a little bit of a spiel on the weed control, and always being on the lookout for those invasives that might be coming into your place. That knapweed came from, I have to call it my weed garden, but what happened was quite a few years ago, the county of Lethbridge wanted to dig up some barrel ditch dirt and bring it and need a place to dump it. So we created a hill on our research farm there, and we got knapweed. So those weeds do come in, and obviously the spread and controlling the spread of it is a big concern. Along the railway, coming in out of BC, and certainly if you go into to BC in the summer, down that Columbia Basin, you'll see knapweed out in that rangeland area quite easily. So that was the first little talk I wanted to discuss with you. The other thing then just goes back, and it's just a follow-up a little bit on what we do with the pesticide applicator course, and talking about personal safety with handling herbicides. And obviously, Jamie suggested maybe I could do something on herbicides and well, chemical safety in general. And I thought a little bit about it, but that can get to be such a long-winded discussion and do's and don'ts. And I thought maybe just one little point I'd kind of bring out here in terms of chemical safety is, what do you do, what would you do, what do you do to keep your truck or your tractor cab chemical free? What can you do to help keep chemicals out of that tractor cab or out of the high clearance floater or even your truck? Protection. Where do you think the #1 protection is going to be on that?
Shut the window.
Filter.
Filter, cab filters? Hands, eh? And that's a little message I wanted to bring out today, is that what we talk about in the pest applicator course is, when we talk about dermal exposure, the highest chance of dermal exposure is going to be on your hands and wrist. You're dealing with your concentrates when you're mixing and loading, and certainly there's chances of splashing on your clothing or your coveralls, but you know that your gloves are probably going to get some chemical on them. And then how do you get those gloves off without getting your hand contaminated? Wash them, right? Wash them first. Now you've washed them, you take the first one off with your glove. Now you take the other one off. Now there's a potential of a little bit of chemical being on your hand. So it's really difficult to keep away from any kind of little minute concentration or minute contamination on your hands. So we always talk about 90 to 95% of dermal exposure is on your hands and wrists when you're dealing with chemicals. So it's a little bit more of a take-home message in terms of handling this stuff, and watch outs when you remove your gloves to wash your hands again. How many carry, farmers and applicators, how many carry just a big jug of clean water on their unit so they can wash their hands quite easily? Yeah. So great idea. Maybe a little soap, that sort of thing too, right? Always the issue with guys, and guys is going to the bathroom too is another issue, right? Take the gloves off, now I gotta go.
Isn't your face and here worse? This area here?
It's
No, seriously, I mean, if you can absorb it easier.
Yes, but you have, the idea is you have on protective clothing. Your coveralls are going to be able to pick up that spray drift, although hopefully you're not in the spray drift. So mixing and loading is, of course, the most dangerous part of chemical handling because you're dealing with the concentrate, right? So extra protection during mixing and loading. Goggles, neoprene apron is a real good idea. The other thing that I always encourage is when you're mixing and loading to have 2 people there. Do you have 2 people when you're mixing and loading? Yeah. One person that's maybe the high clearance operator, he stays chemical free. He tries and keeps himself chemical free. He's maybe checking with the guy that's doing the mixing and loading to make sure he's doing it right. So always that extra assistant during mixing and loading is a great idea as well. Mm-hmm. So I didn't quite bring enough of these, but these are just a little reminder of this little thing about keeping your... Oh, let's, Ken, how would you like to just, or Toby, just pass them out. So there's 2 different sizes of gloves here. You can put the little package in your glove compartment of your truck, and you see there's a little message on it. There's 5 pairs of gloves in there. These are nitrile gloves, which of course are considered good chemical resistant gloves. There's not enough. I have 30 pairs. I had 30 pairs. My wife swiped one last night because she thought that would be a good thing. But anyway, so if you're involved in chemical application, take one, either the large one or the small. Medium or extra large is what I have. So anyway, I didn't quite expect quite so many people here today, but
Hey Bill.
yeah.
How common are portable spill cleanup kits among the farming community?
A spill cleanup kit is usually something that is, you either develop it yourself. I don't know of where you'd go to purchase one that's commercially available. Is that in terms of the spill, generally farmers are mixing and loading in the field. Some choose to mix in their farmyard, which then a spill is easier to control than maybe something that happens in the field. But anybody else got any comments on that?
It goes in the feed, you got it on site in a pet chip, you do it. And it stays there for a long time.
Yeah, yes. We've got a lot better in our managing our spraying and our mixing and loading than what we were years ago. Way back when, I worked for Taber Municipality in my summers as a university student in spraying roadsides, 2,4-D ester, and we didn't really have much in the way of protective equipment those days. I came home one time, I got some 2,4-D ester on my blue jeans. My mom wouldn't let me in the house. We hung them on the clothesline outside, and the next day my dad's tomatoes were all wilted from the vapors of 2,4-D ester. And even with the formulations back with 2,4-D back in the 1950s, 60s, there was what was called the butyl ester of 2,4-D, and that could drift for a couple of miles. Somebody 2 miles away, you could smell them spraying. Then the technology went to the isobutyl esters and the lower volatile esters, and since then we've got into even better formulations of 2,4-D with less drift. But I did smell a little chemical in the air of neighbor spraying there just even a couple of days ago. So we're not perfection in terms of minimizing those volatiles into the air. The only other thing I was going to talk about, and then we move on to the third aspect of, how am I doing on time, Ken? 15 left, is to move into a discussion on Group 14 chemistry. And I'm just going to pass this around. Again, I don't have quite enough to go around. I did print out about 30, and I ran out of time with my printer about 8 o'clock this morning. Actually, it ran out of paper, so I said, well, that's enough. The discussion is going to go into a little bit about some of this Group 14 chemistry, which we will get in the discussion on the paper. Sorry I don't have enough, but just pass those around. Maybe start some over at the other side. And I think it's interesting with the Group 14 chemistry, which are referred to as the PPO inhibitors. And you can see from that little sheet there, if you want to try and pronounce it, it's protoporphyrinogen oxidase. So we just call it a PPO inhibitor. It's an enzyme that this particular class of chemistry works on. And there's different chemistry, different molecule families that all act on that particular enzyme. Some of this chemistry is soil applied. And how many are familiar with Authority, for example, and Focus? So those are kind of some new products that have come in recent years. Prior to, I would say, about 2000, our soil applied chemistry was really limited to Avedex, Fortress, Treflan, Edge, and atrazine. Other than that, most of our stuff was foliar applied. Since 2000, about 2002, 2003, Eric Johnson out at the Ag Canada at Scott, Saskatchewan, was looking for some chemistry that would control kochia in chickweed, in chickpeas. And he identified this Authority, sulfentrazone, as a great product for kochia control. And certainly it has really proven itself in terms of that soil residual aspect with kochia control. We have seen some other chemistry that has come on. One of the limitations with our Group 14 chemistry is, when we're dealing with soil applied, is that we want to get a uniform blanket of chemical on the soil. And if we put it on before seeding, then we have to be cognizant of the type of seeding equipment that we would use that might interrupt that chemical blanket. So I was just going to get Toby to drive across. We have some cornmeal that we kind of spread here. And this just gives you an idea, and it's something to remember about how when you get that chemical blanket down, that you can then go across with your seeding equipment and destroy the uniformity. So I just put some cornmeal down. Yeah. So after Toby has gone across, the idea is just to kind of look at what you might expect to happen with seeding equipment and disturbing your chemical blanket. So. So as you look at this cornmeal strip, if you imagine that was chemical that was applied prior to seeding, and with some of this chemistry, we'd like to get it on a few days ahead. So there's an opportunity for soil activation or moisture activation. In other words, a rainfall that would get the chemical off those soil particles and have it active in the soil. And that was always one of the aspects of fall application of Avedex and Fortress and Treflan granules, is that you would get some moisture during that fall and winter to get it off the granules and have a more uniform chemical blanket. So here, this is just to kind of give you an idea. Yes, I can destroy that chemical blanket that I've sprayed 10 days ago with the type of seeding equipment. This particular case, it's a fairly low disturbance seeding, and you don't get much disturbance there. A product like Chateau and Valterra, which is flumioxazin, good soil activity with that particular product, registered on potatoes and peas, and that's a product that is sold by Valent Canada. You lose activity if you disturb the soil. So they say that right on their label.
Don't you have to have rain first, like Authority Focus, to move it into the soil?
Correct, yes. And in fact, you go back to your labels and the old blue book, right? The Bible keeps you up to date on all the latest. But certainly with Authority, just as you were pointing out, yes, you want that moisture. If you don't get the moisture, then they recommend a shallow incorporation or irrigation. You got irrigation?
No.
Yeah, it becomes a limitation today, right? So Anyway, so it was just to kind of have that discussion and just point out that heat, saflufenicil, has some soil activity. Also very popular is the pre-seed burn down because you get the foliar application, the foliar activity when you mix it with your glyphosate or whatever. So heat is of course pre-seed to cereals, peas, chickpeas, lentils, soybeans, not canola, because there is some soil residual with heat. Goldwing is pyriflufen, is another group 14, and we're seeing that particular product mixed with MCPA. It's pre-seed to cereals, peas, flax, lentils, corn, so considered no residual control. So some of this group 14 chemistry has soil activity, some of it does not, and the activity is primarily foliar. Then Authority, which a lot of you folks are probably familiar with out there in the farm because of that great kochia control in peas and chickpeas, flax and sunflower. There is considerable carryover with Authority, so there are restrictions on the label. Too many pages here.
I can hang on to something.
Okay, will you? Let me just get this in. So thank you. That's. So of course Authority is registered on crops here in Western Canada: flax, chickpeas, peas, and sunflowers. In Eastern Canada,
I say on mustard too, Ken.
okay, is it mustard as well now?
Right,
Okay.
50 acre rate.
Eastern Canada, it's registered on tame mustard, asparagus, faba beans, mint, strawberries, horseradish, brassica, head and stem, transplants only, brassica, leafy greens. So it's a pretty neat product in Eastern Canada. And I pretended I was in Eastern Canada on my little asparagus patch here about 2 weeks ago. So I might only be able to sell my asparagus in Eastern Canada. But anyway, so it is great chemistry to look at. And sometimes you can get some information off the internet on some of this chemistry in uses in other places, such as Eastern Canada. AIM, of course, is another group 14 chemistry, carfentrazone, and that really came in vogue again in about the early 2000s and mixed with glyphosate. Idea there being you would burn down canola that was volunteer canola, but you could plant canola right away again, a different type of transgenic canola, for example. AIM is also mixed with a number of different products, mixed with Authority and Authority Charge, mixed with 2,4-D and called Black Hawk, Clean Start with Credit, Conquer is with bromoxynil and AIM. So again, another chemistry that can be used immediately before seeding canola and still giving you a bit of an expanded spectrum. A couple other products are not available in Western Canada. Ultra Blazer and Reflex are chemistries and actives that we don't use out here in Western Canada. But again, one of them has short residual, the other has no residual. So just a lot of flexibility in terms of some of that chemistry with the Group 14. And I've been babbling away here and not giving a chance for any questions, but
That group 14 focus, for instance, like if people use it more often, what happens? Are there any restrictions later on for different crops? Has it been researched enough?
we actually are doing a lot of work with FMC and New Farm on the focus product and carryover work as well with future crops. The best thing right now is just go to the blue book or go to the label in terms of carryover. Certainly on a very dry year, there's going to be carryover. Authority, they talk about a half-life of Authority of 280 days. So Authority certainly will be a carryover, and there are cropping restrictions with Authority the next year. we again are working with FMC in a number of trials, and I think probably Farming Smarter as well is probably doing some work with them on trying to identify the length of that carryover. But
What's your experience with residue cover in some of those soil active chemistries? I know there's a broad range, like, you know, black versus lots of a duff layer of. Do you feel like, I think sometimes I've seen instances where it just doesn't get through that trash into the soil where it needs to be, and you know there's always these kind of rules of thumb that you need a half an inch or a quarter inch of rain, but it just seems like there's a bit of a discrepancy there.
They're definitely better if you get rain.
Yeah.
They're definitely better.
yeah. So
Just kind of a.
the black soil is always better, unless I don't know what the water solubility is of some of those products, but you going back to the label on things like Authority, it does recommend, or it does say that you need some moisture to get it active in the soil. Whether it'll wash off some of that trash and get you get enough into the soil, that I'm not 100% sure on, Ken.
Are you showing the plot still too?
I haven't seen the plot, so this about 3 weeks ago, I guess I talked to Jamie and I said, Jamie, it'd be really great to get a plot out, and so then to this morning she handed me, she said, hey, we bring your plot out.
You got a couple minutes if you want, or you can let people wander through the break.
Let's just wander through the break, yeah, and I'll as I say, this is a nice surprise to me, but is there weeds coming up in it and that then, Ken?
I haven't looked at it either. It's back there. We can check it out.
We run 125 trials over in our research farm too, so we still got a few to seed. Are you guys all seeded, Ken?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. You're ahead of us. We got to put our striped rust trials in on Monday, because the later we seed the wheat, the better the striped rust. And
What trial is it then, Ken? Is it science?
Oh, it's just a demo on some. Yeah, it's right behind you there, and maybe Bill and I will check it out. It is break time, anyways. We're just having break over here.
If it looks good, let us know.
Well, if there's anything cool coming on, yeah.
well, I see there's Authority and Focus in it, so that's great.
Personally, I'm a huge fan of the residual chemistries, and we've got Dr. Charles Geddes with us here as well.
Yeah.
And I think they're going to be a very valuable tool in dealing with all of the multiple resistance of kochia, and we're working on a project together on that one as well. So even this year, I might show you some more spots where Authority just is amazing on peas. Yeah, for kochia. Any other last questions for Bill? Join me in thanking Dr. Bill Hammond.
Thank you.